How does the tech that runs our world really work? We break it down to its fundamental truths. This is First Principles.
Imagine for a moment that you are sitting at your desk. You have a trading app open on your phone. You see the stock for a major tech company, let's say Apple, hovering at a certain price. You decide to buy. You tap the green button. Almost instantly, a confirmation pops up. You own the share. The money has left your account and the asset is yours. It felt immediate. It felt seamless. In the time it took you to blink, which is about 300 milliseconds, that transaction was settled. To us, that instant response is just how the internet works. We assume the signal went from our phone to a computer somewhere, checked a price, and came back. We assume that the price we saw on the screen was the price everyone else saw at that exact moment. We assume that the market is a singular place where buyers and sellers meet in real time. But how does this actually work? What simple rules make it possible to trade billions of shares in fractions of a second without the whole system collapsing? And more importantly, what happened in the invisible gap between your finger hitting the screen and the confirmation appearing? That gap isn't empty. It is a battlefield. In the time it took your heart to beat once, a war was fought and won by machines moving so fast that they treat your perception of now as ancient history. This is the world of high-frequency trading, or HFT. Today, we are going to crack open the black box of the financial markets. We are going to look past the money and the shouting men in jackets to find the machinery underneath. We are going to deconstruct the technology that has turned global finance into a race against the speed of light. To understand the machine, we first have to look at the magic trick it performs. The magic is liquidity. That is the technical term for the fact that whenever you want to sell something, there is someone there to buy it, and whenever you want to buy, there is someone ready to sell. When you walk into a grocery store, you expect milk to be on the shelf. You don't have to put in an order and wait for a farmer to bring a cow. The grocery store acts as a buffer. They buy the milk before you get there, taking on the risk that you might not show up, so that you can have instant gratification. In finance, this role used to be played by a distinct class of human beings. They were called market makers or specialists. If you look at old footage of the New York Stock Exchange, you see people crowding around a specific booth. That booth was the specialist's post. If you wanted to sell General Electric, your order went to that guy. If nobody wanted to buy it right then, the specialist was legally obligated to buy it from you to keep the market moving. He would buy it, hold it for a few minutes or hours, and then sell it to someone else, hopefully for a slightly higher price. That small difference was the spread. It was his fee for providing liquidity. The magic we see today is that the booth is gone. The screaming men are largely gone. But the liquidity is deeper than ever. You can buy $10 million of stock in seconds. The spread, the difference between the buy price and the sell price, is often just a penny. We think of this efficiency as the natural evolution of computers, just as email replaced letters. We assume that faster computers simply made the old process faster. But that is not what happened. We didn't just speed up the human process, we replaced the fundamental logic of the market. We replaced human judgment with deterministic loops. To understand why, we have to go back to the problem that birthed this industry. The problem wasn't money. The problem was the limit of human physiology. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the financial markets began to electronify. The NASDAQ exchange was the pioneer, effectively a computer network rather than a physical floor. Suddenly, You didn't need to be physically standing in a pit in Chicago or New York to make a trade. You just needed a terminal. This created an opening for a new kind of trader. People figured out that if they watched the prices move on their screens, they could spot inefficiencies. If a stock was going up, they could jump in, ride the momentum for a few seconds, and jump out. This was the birth of day trading. But there was a hard ceiling. A human trader, at their absolute peak performance, has a visual reaction time of roughly 200 milliseconds. That is 1/5 of a second. If you see a price change on a screen, it takes 200 milliseconds for your brain to process the light, make a decision, and send a signal to your hand to click a mouse. For a long time, this was fine, because everyone else was human too. It was a fair fight, but as computers got faster, the amount of data pouring into the market exploded. By the mid-2000s, exchanges were fully digital. The order book, the list of all buy and sell orders, was being updated thousands of times a second. The problem was that the market was moving faster than the humans could see it. By the time a human trader saw a price on their screen and clicked buy, that price was already gone. It was a ghost. The information was stale. This created a desperate need for a new kind of participant. The banks and the exchanges needed something that could react to market data before it became history. They needed to remove the biological bottleneck. They needed to take the human out of the loop entirely. This is where the black box begins to form. To open it, we need to understand the playing field. We need to strip away the concept of stocks and money and look at what a modern exchange actually is. At its first principle, a stock exchange is nothing more than a matching engine. It is a computer program, usually running on a server in a massive data center. This program maintains a list. That list is called the limit order book. Imagine a simple spreadsheet. On the left side, you have a list of people wanting to buy, sorted by who is willing to pay the most. That is the bid. On the right side, you have a list of people wanting to sell, sorted by who is willing to sell for the least. That is the ask. The matching engine follows a very simple algorithm. If the highest price a buyer is willing to pay meets or exceeds the lowest price a seller is willing to accept, a trade happens. The engine matches them, subtracts the shares from the seller, adds them to the buyer, and publishes the price at which the trade occurred. That is the entire mechanism, a list of intentions and a rule to match them. Now, here is the crucial variable, time. The order book is a queue. It is a first-come, first-served system. If you and I both want to buy shares of Apple at $150, and there is only one person selling, whoever gets their order to the matching engine first gets the stock. The loser gets nothing. In the old days, first meant shoving your way to the front of the physical crowd. In the digital age, first is a timestamp. This brings us to the core analogy of high-frequency trading. Imagine you are at a crowded auction house. The auctioneer is selling items instantly, but instead of being in the room, you are bidding by telephone. Everyone else is also on the telephone, but there is a twist. The telephone lines are different lengths. If you are calling from across the street, your voice reaches the auctioneer almost instantly. If I am calling from the other side of the world, my voice takes a split second longer to travel down the wire. Even if we both shout buy at the exact same moment relative to our own watches, you will win every single time. Your signal arrives first. In this scenario, it doesn't matter how smart I am. It doesn't matter if I have a better valuation model or more money. If my wire is longer, I lose. This realization shifted the focus of finance from strategy to geometry. The goal of high-frequency trading is not to predict which way the stock market will go next year or next week. The goal is to be the person with the shortest wire. But simply being close to the exchange wasn't enough because everyone figured that out. They all moved their servers into the same building as the exchange's matching engine. This is called co-location. Suddenly, everyone's wire was the same length. So, if the distance is equal, how do you win? You have to be faster at processing the message. You have to be faster at hearing the auctioneer and shouting back. This leads us to the first technical deep dive, the computer. We tend to think of computers as instant. You press a key, the letter appears. But to a computer engineer, a standard computer is an agonizingly slow, bureaucratic nightmare. Let's look at what happens inside a normal server when a packet of data arrives from the stock exchange. The data comes in through the network cable and hits the network interface card, or NIC. The NIC raises its hand and sends an electrical signal to the main processor, the CPU, saying, "I have mail." The CPU is busy doing a billion other things. It's running the operating system, Windows or Linux. It's managing memory. It's checking the temperature of the fan. When the interrupt comes from the network card, the CPU has to stop what it's doing. It has to save its current state. It has to switch context. It has to copy the data from the network card into the main memory. Then the operating system has to look at the data, decide which program it belongs to, and hand it over to the trading application. This process involves thousands of lines of code and millions of clock cycles. In the world of high-frequency trading, this is an eternity. This is the overhead of a general-purpose computer. It is like having a letter arrive at a massive corporate headquarters, go through the mailroom, then to a secretary, then to a manager, and finally to the CEO. The engineers in HFT looked at this and realized they couldn't use standard computers. They needed to strip the bureaucracy. The first step was a technique called kernel bypass. The kernel is the core of the operating system. It controls the hardware. In a normal system, the kernel is the gatekeeper. Kernel bypass is exactly what it sounds like. The engineers wrote special software drivers that allowed their trading programs to talk directly to the network card, completely ignoring the operating system. They fired the mailroom staff and the secretaries. The CEO went down to the loading dock to grab the mail himself. This shaved off microseconds. A microsecond is 1/1,000,000th of a second. To put that in perspective, a blink of an eye is 300,000 microseconds. Gaining a few microseconds seems trivial, but in the queue of the order book, it was the difference between being first and being last. But even kernel bypass wasn't enough. The CPU itself, the central brain of the computer, was too general. A CPU is designed to do anything, play video games, run spreadsheets, browse the web. Because it can do anything, it isn't optimized for the one specific thing HFT needs, reading a packet and sending a packet. So, the HFT firms abandoned the CPU. They turned to a piece of hardware called an FPGA. FPGA stands for Field Programmable Gate Array. This is the first major aha moment in our understanding of the hardware. Imagine a CPU is like a very smart, very fast mathematician with a pen and paper. If you give him a math problem, he writes it down, works through the steps, and gives you the answer. He is fast, but he has to follow the steps of the calculation one by one. This is sequential processing. An FPGA is different. An FPGA is like a physical circuit board that you can rewire on the fly. It doesn't run software in the traditional sense. It is the hardware. When you program an FPGA, you are literally arranging the logic gates, the microscopic switches on the chip, to form a physical pathway for the data. Think of it like an assembly line. On a CPU, one worker does every step. On an FPGA, you build a factory where the data flows through a pipeline. As the data stream enters the chip, it flows through these physical gates. Here is the magic of the FPGA in trading. It allows for cut-through processing. When a standard computer receives a message from the exchange, it has to wait for the whole message to arrive before it reads it. It's like waiting for a sentence to end before you start understanding the meaning. The FPGA is so fast and so specialized that it starts processing the message while it is still arriving. Imagine the message from the exchange is, "The price of Apple is $150." A standard computer waits for the whole sentence. The price of Apple is $150, then it thinks, then it buys. The FPGA sees the letter T, then H, then E. By the time it sees Apple, it already knows it wants to buy. It doesn't wait for the price. It starts generating the buy order and sending it out the other side while the rest of the price information is still coming in. It is reacting to the beginning of the sentence before the end of the sentence has even arrived. This reduced the time it takes to make a trade to mere nanoseconds. A nanosecond is 1/billionth of a second. This is the timescale of electronics. So now we have the perfect machine. We have stripped away the operating system. We have replaced the general processor with custom circuitry that reacts faster than the message can even finish arriving. We have solved the processing problem. But solving the processing problem only exposed the next barrier, and this barrier wasn't about computers, it was about physics. The market isn't just in one place. In the United States, you have the New York Stock Exchange in Mahwah, New Jersey. You have the NASDAQ in Carteret, New Jersey. You have the futures markets in Chicago, Illinois. These markets are correlated. If the price of a future in Chicago moves, the price of the stock in New Jersey should move instantly to match it. If it doesn't, there is an arbitrage opportunity, a chance to buy low in one place and sell high in the other. The race was no longer about processing speed inside the box. It was about transmission speed between the boxes. It was about the race from Chicago to New Jersey. The distance is roughly 730 miles. For decades, the data traveled over fiber optic cables. Fiber optics are miracles of engineering. They shoot pulses of laser light down thin strands of glass. We associate fiber with the speed of light, and the speed of light is the universal speed limit. Nothing can go faster. But here is the catch, and this is the principle that separates the winners from the losers. The speed of light, denoted as c, is roughly 186,000 miles per second, but that is the speed of light in a vacuum, in the emptiness of space. When light travels through glass, it slows down. It bounces off the walls of the fiber. This is determined by the refractive index of the glass. In standard fiber optic cable, light travels at about 2/3 the speed of light in a vacuum. It loses about 30% of its velocity. For an HFT trader, losing 30% of the speed of light is unacceptable. In 2010, a company called Spread Networks secretly spent hundreds of millions of dollars to dig a new trench from Chicago to New York. They didn't use new technology. They used fiber, but they did something else. they optimize the geometry. Most fiber cables follow railroad tracks or highways. They curve around mountains. They zigzag. Spread networks dug a line as straight as physically possible. They drilled through mountains. They negotiated with hundreds of private landowners to go through their backyards. They reduced the round-trip time between Chicago and New York to 13.3 milliseconds. It was an engineering marvel. They charged traders millions of dollars for access to this dark fiber. It was the gold standard. For about a year. Then the physicists looked at the problem again. They looked at the fiber cable buried in the dirt and said, "Why are we sending light through glass? Glass is dense, air is thin. The refractive index of air is almost 1. It is very, very close to a vacuum. Light travels through air about 50% faster than it travels through glass." This led to the resurrection of a technology that everyone thought was obsolete: microwaves. We think of microwaves as old tech, radar, Cold War communications, but for HFT, microwaves were the holy grail. By mounting microwave dishes on towers, they could beam the data through the air. Suddenly, a covert arms race began. HFT firms began quietly buying up leases on radio towers across Pennsylvania and Ohio. They built chains of line-of-sight relays. The data would leave the data center in Chicago, shoot up to a tower, beam through the air to the next tower 40 miles away, receive it, amplify it, and shoot it to the next one. The result? The round-trip time dropped from 13 milliseconds to under 8 milliseconds. The microwave networks crushed the fiber networks. The hundreds of millions of dollars spent digging that straight trench obsolete. But the race didn't stop there. Because once everyone had microwaves, the only way to win was to optimize the path even further. This brings us to the unseen giant of our story, the final hurdle that these engineers had to contend with. They had optimized the silicon. They had optimized the medium, air versus glass. Now they had to fight the geometry of the planet itself. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but the Earth is curved. If you try to draw a straight line from Chicago to New York on a map, it looks like an arc. But in 3D space, a true straight line would go through the Earth's crust. You can't build a tunnel for microwaves through the Earth. You are stuck on the surface. But the surface is curved. This means that to get the absolute shortest path, the height of your towers matters. HFT firms began calculating the precise curvature of the Earth between signal towers. If you could build a taller tower or find a higher mountain peak, you could space your relays further apart. Fewer relays means fewer hops. Every time the signal has to stop at a tower, be processed by a radio, and sent out again, it takes a few microseconds. If you can skip one tower, you win. So, the landscape of rural Pennsylvania became a strategic chessboard. Firms were fighting over specific hilltops. They were analyzing weather patterns because rain and fog can slow down or block microwave signals. They built hybrid networks, microwaves for speed when the weather was clear, and lasers or millimeter wave radio for backup. They pushed the system until they hit the hard wall of Einstein's theory of relativity. At this point, we have to ask, what is the limit? The limit is roughly 6.6 milliseconds for the round trip. Based on the speed of light in a vacuum and the distance, we are currently hovering just above that. We are bumping against the ceiling of the universe. There have even been discussions, theoretical but serious, about using hollow core fiber. This is a fiber optic cable that is empty in the middle. It guides light through a vacuum tunnel, combining the protection of a cable with the speed of air. There have been proposals to float balloons or drones in the stratosphere to create a straighter line of sight, reducing the curvature problem. There are even neutrinos. Neutrinos are subatomic particles that can travel through solid matter, effectively at the speed of light. In theory, you could shoot a beam of neutrinos straight through the core of the Earth, from Chicago to Tokyo. It would be the ultimate straight line. The engineering to do this is currently impossible. Neutrinos are notoriously hard to detect, but the fact that finance people are even talking about particle physics shows you how deep this obsession goes. So, let's step back and look at what we have uncovered. We started with a finger tapping a screen, a simple desire to buy a stock. We found that to make that tap instant, we built a global machine, a machine that bypassed the bureaucracy of operating systems, turning logic into physical silicon gates on an FPGA, a machine that abandoned the safety of buried cables to beam information through the air on microwave towers, fighting rain and wind to gain a nanosecond, a machine that mapped the curvature of the Earth to find the optimal path. There is a common misconception that high-frequency trading is about front-running, seeing your order and jumping in front of it. While there are predatory strategies, the bulk of HFT is about something more fundamental: market making. It is about keeping the prices in New York in sync with the prices in Chicago. It is about ensuring that the price you see is the real price, instant by instant. But the cost of that accuracy is an infrastructure that operates on a timescale human beings cannot comprehend. We have built a system where the past, present, and future are separated by distances so small that the physical length of a cable inside a data center, a difference of 3 feet, can determine the fate of millions of dollars. When you tap that button on your phone, you are not just sending a signal to a bank. You are firing a starting gun for a race that involves lasers, microwave dishes, and custom microchips, all sprinting across the curvature of the Earth to claim the prize of being first. It is a technological marvel. It is also a reminder of how much effort we are willing to expend to optimize a system. We have effectively conquered the friction of the physical world for the sake of financial efficiency. The market is no longer a place where people meet. The market is a timestamp, and in the race for that timestamp, we have learned that while time is money, the speed of light is the only currency that truly matters. This is the reality of the speed of finance. It is not magic. It is just physics pushed to the absolute edge.
You've been listening to First Principles. Until next time, stay curious.